Are you ready to make more room for the things in your life that truly matter? Hello, and welcome to the Unashamedly You podcast, a space to enlighten, encourage, and empower you to go out and unashamedly be who God is calling you to be. I am your host, Jamie Herndon. I pray you hear less of me and more of Him as you listen to today's episode. Let's grow together. Today, we are so excited to have an incredible guest on our show. We have Shelley Coon from The Goodness Margin. She is a pastor's wife, a mom, leads a busy life, but she's made time to show us her tips and tricks for keeping your home in order and keeping your life in perspective. We are so excited to have you as a guest. I have been following your account for some time. One of the things that really got me, I guess, with your Instagram account was you were talking about the nighttime reset and then setting like the timers and showing how fast. I remember one time you showed your daughter's room and you're like, look how wrecked this is. And then you showed the amount of time on your timer. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that was so fast. And she got it picked up so quickly. And that really got my attention. So your account obviously is very known. A lot of people know it, but how did you get started? You know, you're using Instagram, social media for an account to clean up and to give tips and tricks on how to make your house a home and to live in a clean home. How did your account get started? Like, was this a dream? Was it something that you always imagined? How did you get started?
So I never really set out to start an account about minimalism or anything like that. That wasn't necessarily my goal years before it happened. But 2017, I had a 2-year-old. We were 2 years into our church plant. We had her the first year. It's always easy to remember how long we've been here because she was born right after we started the church. And so my life was I was very overwhelmed, and I felt all of that overwhelmed. And I realized I needed to go back to some of the routines and things that I used to do before life just started getting really, really busy. And so I really went back to those routines, and I realized how much of a difference it made. And I was passionate, and I talked to my friends about it. And so it was something I loved sharing with my friends about, hey, I've started doing this and this made such a difference. Well, then a year later was when I really discovered minimalism. And so several of my friends were like, hey, this is super interesting. You should do a Facebook group and we'll join you as you go through and purge your house. So, okay. So I started that the week of Thanksgiving, actually. I was kind of bored and started this little group on Facebook. And I go to a conference in January and someone said, hey, I know who you are. I'm in your group on Facebook. And first of all, I didn't even know. I guess I didn't have notifications set up or whatever. I didn't know that other people had joined. So I was, okay, this is crazy. And she said, I've loved it. I've really loved following along. And I've started minimizing my house too. And so that was sort of the beginning of that. Well, at the end of each year, my husband and I sit down and we talk about our goals. And I had been wanting to start a blog for a long time, maybe not necessarily knowing what it would be about. And so when we were sitting down talking, I told my husband, I said, I'd really want 2020 to be the year that I start my blog. And I want to talk about these routines and talk about minimalism and all of these things that have made such an impact in my life. So my husband is the big picture guy. I see the little details and he sees the future. And so he's like, well, you have to do YouTube too. One day we can monetize that, which YouTube terrified me. The thought of being on video and all of that, but you just kind of have to get over yourself with that. So we did, we started in the first week of February, and my first video dropped, my blog post dropped, and I started Instagram with it as well. So I figured it would be like my mom and my sister and like my 3 best friends who would follow along. Well, we go to a conference we had here in Georgia the next week. And all of these people are like, hey, I love that video. And I mean, I felt so vulnerable because it was this realization, oh my goodness, like my friends are watching, like, not just like my best friends, but other people are following along. And that was a big hurdle of just the terrifying feeling. I wanted to share this information, but oh my word, people are actually following and listening to this. And so Then March of 2020, we remember what happened. And all of a sudden, everyone is home with their stuff. And that is really where I began to see my account, at least on Instagram, really expand because I started purging my house again and everyone else did too. I mean, here we are all of a sudden stuck at home with all of our stuff. And so that's really where it got started. And you do feel really vulnerable putting yourself out there. I am not someone who loves the spotlight by any means. And it is extremely uncomfortable when you have a perfect stranger come up to you and say, "Hey, I follow you." And you just like, what are you supposed to say? Because you don't know what to say. And it's uncomfortable. But at the same time, I've had women come up to me or send me messages with tears in their eyes saying, I started, in fact, recently, this young mother, she had her first baby. I love this family so dearly. She came up to me, tears, and said, "We started your nighttime routine. I was so overwhelmed. I felt like I would never get my life back on track after having a baby." And we can all remember what that was like when our lives totally changed by having a child. And she said, "I talked to my husband, we watched the video together and we started doing this and it literally changed our life." And that is the reason why I continue to put myself out there and to talk about these things, because I am so passionate about it. And I do believe that if you implement routines, if you get rid of all the excess in your life, that it will make a big difference.
I love that. And that is so true. I heard someone say something one time about that they wrote a book and they said it was so exciting. Like while they were writing the book and they were getting all the stuff together and, they were putting it out there, and then they sold their first book and they're like, someone's actually reading this.
Yeah.
They said it was like that you were just like stripped down and having a surgery in front of everyone, because everyone is getting to see all the things that you've put out there on the table and let them see it, with you letting them see your clutter and your stuff that you're wanting to get rid of. And them getting to see that. So that is true. It's a very vulnerable feeling, but at the same time, if we don't ever do that, you're constantly, like you said, when your goals and your dreams are coming up, you're like, I want to have a blog. But what if you never do? And what if you never put yourself out there and did that? You wouldn't have the success or the satisfying feeling of going after something and getting to release those passions for everyone else. So I love that you talked about that. You said a little bit about, like it was hard putting yourself out there on social media at first. There are so many people that come up to me or that will message me and say, I want to get started with something. And they'll have a passion and they'll have something that they're really good at, or, that they're starting or that they're very passionate about. And they want to put themselves out there on social, but it's just that first step, creating that account, getting that name together and making that first post and putting yourself out there. Is there like a tip or a trick that you could give them, or, something that you could give someone and say, this is what I did at first and I just started it and here we are?
So I do believe that consistency, in all areas of our life, consistency is pretty much the key. But that is one of the reasons I waited until February of 2020, is because I told my husband, I don't want to do this and just be someone who puts something out there once every 3 months. And that's fine if that's what you want to do, but I wanted to do it consistently. And so for the first 2 years, basically, I put a video out just about every single week. Like I was really consistent with that. And then there have been a few changes in life. I just have a lot of responsibilities, and I realized, okay, I'm going to have to cut back to twice a month, which is totally okay. But I do think that if you're going to do this, you need to get ahead of it. And if you want to put something out on social media, make a plan. Okay, this is what I want to do. What is a plan for what you're going to post? Definitely scheduling. There's all kinds of tools to schedule so many of those things in advance. Just creating a plan makes a huge difference. And that way, when times are busy, you already have content that you're planning on putting out. That is, to me, that's really, really important.
That's so true. Yes, consistency is key. There are certain things that will take you far in life, and consistency and showing up every single day, whether you feel like it or whether you don't, whether you want to do it or whether you don't, being consistent with it. If you want to be successful, that's a big key. So your account, tell us a little bit about your account, where we can find you, and give us some tips. Like I said, that resetting your home at night, that is something that really stuck out to me the most. I vividly remember one of the first videos watching you, and that was your daughter's room. And you're like, look how big of a wreck this is. And I'm like, that looks like my daughter's room right now. And you're like, set this timer and watch what all we can get done. And then you showed the timer, and I'm like, oh my goodness, like that's amazing that it took her 10 or 15 minutes, her and her daughter getting in there. They got it all done and they knocked it out. And then it's so much better instead of just
Yes.
continuing to put it off. So give us a little bit about your account.
So I'm on Instagram. It's The Goodness Margin. You can find it there. And then also on YouTube, it's also The Goodness Margin. And any of those places you find me, you should be able to find links to any of the others. I also have a website at www.thegoodnessmargin.com. I'm not sure if you're supposed to say the www or not. My husband always laughs at me. He is the technology behind all of this. Like he does. I had somebody come up and ask me a bunch of questions about editing on YouTube. I cannot help you there. Marry someone amazing like my husband that can, if you don't know how to do that, because I don't. And I don't really want to learn how to do that. So I'm on YouTube, The Goodness Margin, Instagram, website. I am on Facebook. I haven't figured Facebook out yet. It just is hard to interact on Facebook, I feel like, with a business account. So it is there. The information is there as well. And really what it is in its name, The Goodness Margin. I wanted to find margin in my life for the good things. I have always been someone who loves productivity. I want to be productive. I don't sit still well. I want to do things, but that is really a recipe for burnout if we're just consistently doing things. And also, are we doing the right things? Are we doing the important things? I could talk a long time about that. Priorities has been something that's really, especially over the last year, has just gone around and around in my mind. And so, what are your priorities? Why do you want these things to be that way? And talking about the evening routine, looking at the end result. So in the mornings, walking downstairs, which I come downstairs to my bedroom, however you get to your main living area. We just visualize walking into a kitchen with the sink full of dishes from last night, the kids' homework still on the table, all of that stuff. What feeling does that evoke? It's not one of peace or let's seize the day. And so instead, imagine walking down into somewhere that's quiet and clean. You feel peaceful. Like, I'm going to grab my coffee. I'm going to go right to my morning routine, which is the first thing is, reading my Bible and praying. I'm not going to feel like, hold on, I'm distracted by this clutter. I'm distracted. And that's so many times what clutter is in our life is it's just a distraction. So if my end goal is to start my day off on a great foot, then I start the night before with that evening routine. And I do feel like that is why it does resonate with so many people, is because just that one thing of resetting your house at night makes a massive impact into your next day. And also it keeps that stuff from really building up. I mean, I'm sure that I've shared my daughter's room multiple times because she is a little creative genius, but she can make a mess like nobody I have ever seen. And I do want to give people hope. She turned 7 in December. I have watched a little change in her. Like, she has become where that she is a little more tidy and she cleans her stuff up better. So for all of you mamas out there who are feeling hopeless, there is hope. There is hope. They will eventually catch the stuff on. But yeah, so the evening routine is just preparing for the next day. And that's so many times what our routines are, is we are prepared. So we're ready. We're setting ourselves up for success. My next day is set up for success because even if I wake up late, I already have my clothes laid out. I've already got the next day ready. I use a planner very religiously. I already know what I'm doing the next day. That's, to me, a very, very important routine.
I love that. That's so good. And it is so true. Like you said, when you walk downstairs and there's things, the sink's full of dishes, you've got stuff strolled out everywhere. It's like you're still picking up and having to go back to yesterday instead of getting to start fresh for today. And I love that you said it's not peace. It's not peaceful for us to do that. This is January and it's the beginning of the new year. And I know we all have super high ambitions and dreams and goals of how we want this year to go. What is something that you could tell someone that they could start on for their home, maybe on the minimalist, like the decluttering some
Mhm.
things, getting rid of some things for, my spring cleaning, I feel like starts whenever I take my Christmas tree stuff down. I start getting out and thinking of all the things that I need to put up and to throw away. What are something that you could maybe a tip that you could give someone that's wanting to declutter and go that route this year?
Yeah. So, it doesn't have to be where that you go through your entire house. If you look on YouTube, there are people who take like a couple of weeks and they go through their entire house from top to bottom. Well, that's probably all that they're doing. And maybe most of us don't have like 3 weeks to absolutely devote to that. So take it small. Actually, this month in January on the Goodness Margin, we're doing a little challenge. And so it's TGM. The T stands for a tiny habit or towards a goal. What's one little thing you can do that's towards one of your goals? And if you haven't set goals, think about where your priorities are. What are you wanting to prioritize this year? And then what are steps that you can take to move towards that goal? So one little thing that you do. The goodness is finding something good in the day, something that brings you joy or something that's restful. And then the M stands for minimalism. Just get rid of one thing a day. And I have found that even though I have minimized my house over and over again, it's a consistent thing that I typically don't find just one thing. I mean, the other day I went through my drawers, and yes, some of them were plastic forks that my daughter doesn't use anymore, but I found 17 things. It was like 17 things. So I definitely recommend getting started with minimalism. You don't start with the hard stuff. Don't start with the box of your grandmother's things that she gave you, sentimental stuff. Maybe don't start in your closet if you're someone who really loves clothes. That's lots of times a little bit more of a difficult spot. But start in your kitchen or in your bathroom and just open that cabinet and visualize what you want it to be. Do you want to open it and be worried something's going to come falling out at you, or have it where everything's just kind of, very cluttered looking? Or would you rather you know exactly what's there, you know exactly where it goes. When it's time to put things away, you have an exact place for things, which naturally is going to happen when you have less stuff. And so pulling all that stuff out and just being really honest with yourself. Have I used this in the last 6 months? Do I use this? Maybe it's something that sometimes in our kitchen we'll have stuff that's like broken that we just put back. Like, why is it still there? So really ask yourself those questions. And if you haven't, the 6-month rule to me is a really good one. If you haven't, get rid of it. And when I went through my kitchen, I mean, I got rid of a lot of like platters and things that were still in the boxes that maybe had even been wedding gifts. And this March will have been married 20 years. So, like, why in the world have I moved with this like 17 times? So going through and really asking yourself those hard questions. And then when you put that stuff back and you realize how neat it looks and how easy it is to maintain it when there's less, it sort of will typically light a fire. And it's like, okay, I'm ready to move on to something else. So I'm an all or nothing girl. I typically will like go in, like when I decided to do my kitchen, when we came home from Thanksgiving, I took everything out of every cabinet and I had everything was full and it was like a whole day situation. You don't have to do that. You can go one cabinet at a time and just ask yourself those questions. Set a timer. Like you mentioned, I love a timer for 5 or 10 minutes and see what you can pull out that you don't need anymore. And it's really amazing how much we can get done in a short amount of time. And then another big tip with minimizing is once you have decided this is what's leaving my house, get rid of it immediately. Go ahead and put it in a box, put it in a bag, put it in the back of your car, drop it off at your local donation site. Do that today. Don't let it just sit there, because either you're going to just think, well, maybe I should keep it, or maybe whatever, or especially if it's your kids' stuff, they will all of a sudden realize that it was their favorite toy, that even though they haven't played with it in a year and it's broken, that they never, ever want to part with it. So go through that cabinet, go through that closet, whatever, and then get it out of your house that day. And you're going to start to see a big, big difference.
Mentioning that, so I went through my kids' playroom and I filled up black trash bags. That's another tip for you moms.
Yeah.
Put it in a black trash bag. They have no idea what it is. I've put it in the white ones before, a clear one, and they can see what I've got in there. And I put it in the back of my car and I picked them up from school. And then I drove through Goodwill on our way home. And they're like, why do we have to go through Goodwill? And I'm like, I just have some stuff I have to get rid of. They have never asked for anything that was in that black trash bag, and it was gone. So it was good. It felt good to me to have their toy room cleaned up.
Mhm.
And then yes, when they start going through it and then they're falling apart because they love that I start giving in. I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe you do love that.
Yeah.
And then also, one thing that I have done actually is I have decluttered some stuff before, put it in a bag and put it in my garage, or put it in a box and put it in my garage. And then I think if I need it, because I'll tell myself, I can't get rid of that because what if? And so
Mhm.
then I'm like, well, I'm going to put it in here. And then if within 6 months or within whatever amount of time, if I don't even remember what's in that bag or what's in that box, and I have not even went out there looking for it, I wasn't going to use it. So then I can safely take it to Goodwill. So if you're like me and it's hard for you to part with some things, maybe you could just put it in a box in your garage or in your storage. And then if you haven't looked for it in a certain amount of time, realize it's easier to part with. Like, okay, I didn't need this really. I wasn't going to go looking for this or use this. So I love all the tips that you've given. And yes, the timer is huge. I love a timer. You realize how much you can get done whenever a clock's ticking against you.
Mhm.
And I don't usually sit down and waste time on social media. If I know I only have 10 minutes to do this, I won't sit down as many times to like scroll or look at something or answer text because I'm like, I've only got 10 minutes and I've got to get this
Mhm.
done. So I love that. One thing that you were talking about though, and we'll end on this, is you were talking about priorities and making, I didn't realize that that's why your name was the goodness margin. It's because you wanted to make more time for the good things in your life. I love that. But you were talking about priorities and you said that doing certain things like this is set your priorities in line. Give us something on that. Like what, maybe once you did this, the way that your priorities shifted or changed because you were able to reset.
So, so many times we will say, I prioritize this thing, but we've all heard the old saying, like, show me your checking account and your calendar, and that I will tell you what your priorities are. And that's a little bit scary sometimes. Like, and as you talked about social media, I mean, that is really, I didn't even think about that with setting a timer, but yeah, if you set the timer, then you're like, boom, I'm hitting it. I'm going full force. I'm not going to waste any time. I know on mine, I don't know why on Sunday morning is when it pops up that little iPhone gives me the thing saying, this is how much time you spend on social media. And I've actually quit looking at it because it's a little bit devastating. I'm like, oh my word, what am I doing with my life? This is terrible. And if you said it out loud to most people, they would be, which I can't even think of what it is again, because I don't look at it anymore. They would be like so shocked and, just really saddened by your state of life when the reality is theirs probably looks exactly the same way too. And so we may say, well, my priorities are this. I have a 16-year-old, and I mean, with him turning 16, it really made me realize like I have a few years left with him, and that's it. And as a mom, yes, I mean, my husband and I pastor a church. We have put the word of God into our kids, but I think some of that sometimes, like for me, I'm like, okay, but have I really done all I should do? And so I realize I will say a priority is to be sure that my children love the word of God, that they understand what it means, and any questions they have are answered. But am I doing my part? And so I started doing a weekly Bible study with my son, just the two of us at home, because when we stop and say, okay, a priority is this, but what am I doing with it? My marriage is a priority. But I know my husband and I, one of our goals this year is to have a more regular date night because we are horrible at that. And yes, we love each other, but no couple ever plans for their marriage to go still. They don't plan for okay, it's been a few years and we haven't made enough time for each other or whatever. So if that's a priority, then how am I creating a plan for this? And so going back to how that I feel that minimalism and these routines have changed, that is, I used to feel like I cleaned up all the time. I do love a clean house. I love a tidy house. And so I'm going to have that. And so I was spending a lot of time picking up, a lot of time doing those things. And that's really not how I want to spend all of my time. Like, I don't want my kids to leave. And I'm like, well, I didn't get to do these memory things, but I had a clean house, And so by minimizing, it is so simple. In the evenings, it's a family affair. We all go through and we pick up. Throughout the day, I'm like, hey guys, I need you to clean up in the kitchen or whatever. And so I have created margin for those priorities by having my house easily in order, if that makes sense. Like it's not difficult for me to have a tidy house because we only have the stuff that we need. And I mean, if you do follow on Instagram, you see I have stuff in my house. It's not like we live in like an IKEA white box with, no decorations or anything like that. We have stuff. We all have too many clothes, I'm sure, and probably too much stuff, but it's easy to keep clean. And I do feel that that when you start focusing on, when you're looking at minimalism, it's not focusing on what I'm getting rid of. It's focusing on what I'm keeping. And why am I keeping this? Why do I have this thing in my house? Why do I have 4 sets of dishes? Is it because I just haven't taken the time to realize I actually only need 1 or, maybe 2 if you need to? But why am I keeping this thing? And so then we look at our time. Why am I doing this with my time? Why am I spending my time in this way? Does it line up with my priorities? Does spending an hour on social media line up with my priorities, or is there something else that I should be doing instead? I think for me, the morning is a great way for me to, it's a good way to illustrate this. My priority is my time in the morning with the Lord. But I don't know about you, but sometimes I can grab my phone first thing and I'm like, oh my word, it's like, 30 minutes later. And I've totally wasted the first 30 minutes of my day. Whereas if I'm like, no, I'm putting that down, which I'm still working on that habit. It's a work in progress. Putting that down, I'm going straight to my devotion and my coffee and having that quiet time with the Lord. And so when we focus on what is the most important, and we not just say it with our words, but we take the time to write those things down and to plan that out and say, this is what I'm going to do with my time, then it does make a big impact on our life.
Wow, I love that so much. And something that you just said I've never heard before is you're not focused on what you're getting rid of. You focus on what you're keeping. I've never heard that before. And that makes it easier to get rid of certain things because it's like, why am I keeping this? Like focus on the reason you're keeping it, not all the things that you're getting rid of, or the reason you're getting rid of them is irrelevant. The reason you're keeping it is what you want to do. And then that also makes sense with what you said about everything else, with the date night, with your marriage. What are you keeping? With your son and doing the one-on-one Bible study, it's what you're keeping. It's what you want to have in your life. It's not what you're getting rid of or what you're not focused on the fact that he's getting older and he's going to be gone and I'm not going to have this time with him. But what am I instilling in him that I want to keep? What is the time that I'm keeping with him? What are we doing in that time? And that you want to keep your marriage, that you want to keep those things in your life. And that one saying played out in every other thing that you said. You're focused on what you want to keep and what you want to have, not what you're getting rid of and what you're no longer having. So I loved that so much. You gave so many amazing tips. I know that this is going to help so many people. You guys, I will link all of her things in the bio below. Make sure that you read it. But she's at thegoodnessmargin.com, The Goodness Margin on YouTube, The Goodness Margin on Instagram and Facebook. Thank you so much, Sister Coon, for hopping on here. And I know that you've inspired so many people with cleaning and all those things, but I know that this podcast is also inspiring others to get out there and to do something that they have been wanting to do, that dream, that goal they've been writing down. You have allowed them to see the bigger picture today. There's absolutely no doubt. So thank you so much for being vulnerable, putting yourself out there in more than just cleaning and minimalizing, but also in saying, I was scared, but I put the YouTube out there. I hopped on here. I thought it was just going to be my friends, but it grown into more than that. So thank you so much for sharing that and for unashamedly being yourself.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. If you've not already subscribed to our podcast, what are you waiting on? Make sure you subscribe, like, and leave us a review and let us know how much you are loving these episodes. Also, make sure to share this and let your friends know what's going on and this new podcast that we have out. There's no doubt that we were created for such a time as this, and I cannot be more excited to join you Wherever you are on life's journey, we all start from somewhere, and wherever you are, that's exactly where Unashamedly You is wanting to meet you.